Hey, this is Phil Lilley, Lilley's Landing Resort in Marina on Lake Taneycomo. Going to do one cast today. It's Saturday the 9th or 10th. I'm not sure. I think it's the 10th. It's the 9th. Not running any water this morning. It's about 9:30 in the morning. We've checked out a whole bunch of boats today. The lake's pretty busy, but not this area. Pretty cool. I'm going to try throwing just a 32nd ounce jig with 2-pound line. First, I've got a sculpin jig with a sculpin head. I'm going to sneak a little bit closer to this bank, so there are a lot of boats going by. Hopefully kind of keep them behind me. The water's about 8-9 foot deep here, so what I'm going to do is start working at kind of shallow, 3 or 4 foot deep, and then I'll start letting it sink, kind of see where the fish are. I'm fishing over here because the sun's not up and on the water yet. That bluff really shades you till almost 11 o'clock for the most part. And you'll see a lot of our guides fish a pink worm under a float over here in this shade until about that time. Nothing on the first cast. In talking to our guides, there's not one thing that's working real good. They'll fish that pink worm under a float with 2-pound line, and they'll catch, 5 or 6 fish, and then they'll go to night crawlers. Of course, if they're fishing below Fall Creek, most of them are right now. Then they'll go to night crawlers and try that, and maybe a micro jig under a float. And they're really just, their trips are trying different spots with those baits mainly, maybe the mega worm under a float. And I want to say scrounging out, but coming up with if you had 2 people on a trip, 20 fish a day right now is pretty good for a 4-hour trip. And there's no real reason that I know of why the fishing has been so slow. And that's not a terrible trip. But, we're used to talking about trips where people will catch 30 and 40 fish. Not a piece, but 2-people trips, 2-person trip. So your guides are really having to work for it, and people that are going out on their own, they have to work for it too. Just not, for whatever reason, it just hadn't been that great. That's kind of the way it is. The auction content, I took it last night, and it was right at 4. which is not bad. For this time of year, it's pretty normal. Josh and I, my son-in-law, we fished some yesterday. He's not a big fly fisherman, but I took him out fly fishing. I'm going to go ahead and get up on the deck. Took him up in the trophy area above the Narrows, and we fly fished and did pretty good. I think we had 4 or 5 apiece. Had a couple of 17-inch rainbows. Then they turned the water on, and we caught a couple more as the water came on about 1 o'clock. And then we went last night. This is not a new technique at all. Actually, Chuck Grice has been selling glow sticks out of his fly shop for years. And the little glow sticks are just real small sticks that you break them, and then they'll glow for about 8 hours, and you stick them in a float, and believe it or not, you can take them out at night and use we were using a mega worm under a float up in the trophy area, and you can see that float move. You can see the bite. I was a little skeptical, but Blake's been doing it this week and doing pretty good. I think you can probably use a jig under a float and do just as well. Those fish, they can see real good at night. And it seems like they're pretty active at night, so it's kind of an ideal time to go. Now last night there was a little fog. I call it a thick haze. It wasn't real foggy. We could see real well traveling, but once you get stopped, is a little difficult to pick up where we were in accordance to how far away from the bank you were and whatnot. Now normally I'd at least gotten a couple of bites by now. I haven't seen anything. I'm going to go ahead and throw this other jig. I've got a 16th ounce, a little heavier jig. No, I take that back. This is it's a 32nd ounce. It might be the same exact jig. I think it is. I thought I had a different color jig on. So I'm going to stay with this. But we were able to catch, we were out for a couple hours, and I think we caught 5 or 6 apiece. I think Josh did a little better than I did as far as numbers. But I kept picking up this jig with the rod I'm using right now and throwing a jig up there at night. Of course, it's all feel. And I caught 5 or 6 just on the jig. I had to force myself to put it down and use the float, because that's the reason why we're up there, is to kind of test out that glow stick. think Josh could see that float move a lot better than I could too. It's just a little hazy tonight. I might venture over to the shallow side for a minute. There is a little midge hatch coming off, and they are rising a little bit, but that's another thing that we've really noticed is the lack of midge. I'm not sure if you call it lack of midge hatches, but the lack of these rainbows responding to midge hatches and not coming up and eating them off the surface like they normally would. Especially when the leaves start falling, they'll get in those groups of leaves and feed pretty actively, and we can usually pick them off pretty easy with a little zebra midge under a float. So my favorite type fishing is in the fall doing that. I don't think I've done one cast since I went up Thursday morning with Blake and went up below the dam and waited Thursday morning and fished with Leonard Keeney. Leonard is pretty proficient in fishing a sculpin pattern. He ties them, and we buy them from him. His sculpins are in our shop, and so he kind of showed us his technique in fishing sculpin. What you got to use, I was using a 7-weight rod and 8-pound line, 8-pound tippet, which is typically heavy, but when you use a sculpin, it's a pretty big fly, and it's pretty heavy. It's a heavy fly, so you got to use pretty heavy tippet, because if you set the hook on that heavy fly, just by itself it can snap the line. And I caught a real nice rainbow. It's the only fish I had. Blake caught a few smaller rainbows, but we did see some browns up there in the 25-inch class, and even had one chase a fly. Leonard had one come up out of the deeper water and run up on a sculpin he was stripping. Didn't take it though. And we've heard that catching, especially away from the outlets up below the dam, it's been pretty slow. This is unusual to go this long up here without getting at least a bite. Okay, I'm gonna go out in the sun. Can't be any worse. Like I said, there's kind of a haze kind of hazy. It's not super bright. I've kind of noticed, you know, on the generation pattern, they're running that water 4 or 5 hours now in the afternoon at almost 10,000 CFS, which is a lot of water, 3 units. And Table Rock actually rose in the ooh, there he is. Oh, I just missed him. Doggone it. Actually rose above power pool just a couple of inches. And Beaver is still down below power pool, but they're running a little bit of water there. And they're still running quite a bit of water out of Bull Shoals. But Bull Shoals is well under power pool. So I don't know what's going on. I'm not sure why they're running so much. They're running a lot down at Bull Shoals, about 5 or 6 hours, the same as what we're running, but even more. I got that bite thrown out. It was still sinking. He hit it on the drop. Well, one thing I've noticed here in the last week is our water has, I don't want to say changed color. It's definitely not as clear as it was, and it's almost got a green dirty tint to it, and I'm sure it's all coming from Table Rock. So that water down there at 130 foot deep is starting to get a little bit mossy. It's not mossy, but it's definitely got an algae, maybe an algae bloom or something going on. Might have something to do with the fish. I'm not sure how, but that is one change that we've seen. And that's pretty typical, I think, in the fall. You know, that I'm not going to say Table Rock is starting to turn, because there's no way. We've got to have some cold, windy weather for that to happen. And it has not been cold. I think that late temperature, surface temperature up on Table Rock is still in the mid 70s. And our temperatures, oh, there was a bite. Our temperature is about 55, 56. So that surface temp on Table Rock's got to be dropping into the 50s before we see any kind of movement as far as the lake turning on Table Rock. That's not going to happen probably for another 6 or 7 weeks. Try working a little faster. All right, we're going to do one more cast. I think that was a touch. Okay, we'll do one more. I'll move up just a little bit more. I almost got the pink worm out, but honestly thought I could do better with the jig. Bottom. Okay. Thanks for watching. Sorry I didn't catch no fish, but one thing you got is an honest fishing report. We'll see ya tomorrow.